With Notre Dame bringing home a championship in 2023, there is one player talked about more than anyone else. Pat Kavanagh is the poster boy for the Fighting Irish, boasting 221 points in his career and 77 in his senior season. The Tewaraton Award finalist is characterized by his toughness, and this was shown on championship weekend where Pat played through a torn hamstrings and was still able to put points on the board. Kavanagh is a feed-first kind of player, but he has no problem going to the goal and has one of the most diverse skill sets to do it. He's able to balance making smart decisions while also being creative on the field, always utilizing behind the backs to increase his angle. Him and his brother have been a deadly duo the past 2 years and are gearing up one more time in 2024, gunning for back-to-back championships. Today I'm going to analyze some of Pat Kavanagh's film and show what makes him great. I want you to pay attention to the 3 keys of his game: his creativity, passing, and dodging with contact. If you can take these portions of Kavanagh's game and implement it into your own, you'll become a great player. One of Pat's strength is dodging through contact. In this clip, Pat initiates his dodge from up top, and instead of dodging to free his hands, he attacks his defender, posting up like he's a basketball player. This puts the defender off balance on his heels. Pat now controls the matchup, and the pole is just reacting. He rolls off his pole, using him as leverage so a buffer is created. With this space, Pat gets into a shooting position with nearly free hands. This leads the pole to overextend and try to make some contact on Pat's hands. Pat feels the defender move his stick over on the front side of his body and knows the rollback is open. With the pole's body completely flipped, Pat rolls back and immediately shoots, not even giving the pole a chance to check him. Shooting out of a roll is one of the most underrated skills in an offensive player. Here's Pat's OT game winner versus Maryland this season. While many of Kavanagh's highlights are flashy, this one's a little different. He does all the subtle things right, and it gives him free hands to go to the cage. The biggest thing to watch in this clip is how Pat uses his body language to fool his defender. He starts his clip extremely upright, jogging slowly like he's just going to rotate the ball around. Seeing this makes Makar relax in his own posture and stand a little taller in a less defensive position. As soon as Pat sees this, he shifts his body into a dodging position and gets downhill towards the goal. Makar is completely out of position and wasn't ready for a dodge, so he tries to run and catch up. Along with dodging downhill, Pat flips his hands back like he's going to roll back, making Makar hesitate even further. Pat then gets free hands and releases a high-to-low bouncer on Rupel's opposite hit, sealing the game. In this clip at X against Duke, Pat drives up the field against his pole, putting him in a trail position. To compensate, the pole comes into a V-hold, trying to contain the top side. As soon as Pat feels this, he leans in and dictates where he wants to go. He pushes up against the pole's stick, causing him to overcompensate the top side. Once Pat feels this, he rolls back and forces his pole to have to move his stick up and over him. This small period of free hands during the transfer of the pole's stick is when Pat is able to get a shot off. Again, he utilizes his ability to shoot off the rollback. Kavanagh's second strength is his creativity. Let's look at a flashy clip from Kavanagh against Duke. To give context, the shot clock is about to wind down and Jake Taylor picks up a ground ball with a pole in his hands. He immediately chucks it behind the back to Pat on the crease. Pat catches it at his knees, fading from the goal. While Pat may have been able to get a normal shot off here, he increases his angle with a behind the back and surprises helm and cage. The most impressive thing is that he was able to change levels from high to low with a BTB, even furthering the deception of the shot. There are some things in Pat's game that shouldn't be tried by the general public, but it works for him. This dodge down the alley had everyone thinking he was going to go to a normal shot on the run, but instead he kept dodging closer to the goal and began to lose his angle a little bit. To counteract this, he throws an on-the-run behind the back to the bottom corner of the goal. What we can take away from this dodge, though, again, is his body language. When Pat gets free space from his man, he winds up like he's going to shoot from deep. This completely freezes the slide, allowing him to get closer to the cage, furthering the chance of scoring. Once he gets to the point of his release, he could have easily taken a normal overhand shot, but since he has the behind the back in his toolkit, he's able to increase his angle. Even more important than angle, it completely deceives the goalie. He's barely able to react to the ball because he wasn't expecting that release point. Pat is also creative with how he feeds. In this clip against UVA, he uses a BTB to free his hands and deceive the off-ball defender. Once Pat gets up on an island, he sees Jake Taylor cutting across the field with a defender at his back. By throwing this ball behind his back, the ball is moving towards Jake Taylor, making it easy for him to catch and shoot. If he were to throw this normally, the trajectory of the ball would have made it harder to catch and finish. If you can take away anything, it's that Pat uses behind the backs and creative mentality to get the most out of his angles and positioning. Aside from his creativity, Pat's strength is as a feeder, and he showcases that here. When other teams scout him, the number one thing is to stay on his hands behind and make it hard for him to feed at X. This means Pat has to create his own space behind because he's such a threat. He starts by bully dodging his defender, sending him backwards. He further utilizes this space by cutting over the pick, slowing down his defender. With all this space, he sees his brother cutting across the field and throws it to open space where he's going to be for a catch and rip. Again from X, we see Pat utilizing pick play to get his hands free to feed his weapons. He activates his dodge above the pick right as he sees his pole is level with the pick, forcing him to navigate it. This gives him a buffer, allowing him to either feed or continue his dodge. Here he looks up and doesn't see anyone immediately open, so he continues his dodge. This makes the defense respect him as a shooter, and the slide begins to hedge towards him. As soon as Pat sees the slide move off Jake Taylor, he elevates his body and switches from a dodge into a feeder and hits Taylor on the crease for the around the world finish. Being a good feeder is about having your head up at all times. Most players know this, but many times players forget this ideology when they go for ground balls. They scoop them up and get tunnel vision. This clip is a good example of how Pat always has his head up, even through a ground ball. Pat picks up the ground ball, running away from the cage, and immediately pops up with his head up. This upright, athletic posture makes it look like he's going to shoot, and he draws the attention of every Duke player, and they all forget about Chris on the crease. From this position, Pat levers a pass through the defense to Chris, allowing him to finish. How can you improve your game? From Pat Kavanagh's game, there's a couple things that you should focus on and apply to your own. First, when you play, think about what is the best way to optimize my angle. A majority of Pat's magic shots are simply a way of increasing his angle. Secondly, work on shooting off a rollback. It is the basis of a majority of shots out of contact, and if you can master it, goalies can't read you and poles can't guard you. Lastly, always have your head up. No matter what position you're in on the field, someone may be open. If you're just a goal scorer, you have an amazing opportunity to start adding some assists to your game because defenses do not expect it. A good example of this development is Eric Dobson's college career. But most important of all, when we look at Pat, it is a great example of a player with an amazing mentality. He chooses to ride hard every play and chooses to play through pain to help his team. Sitting at 5'10", 175, he's not the biggest, strongest, or probably fastest on his team. But what he does have is some of the best stick skills, a high IQ, and a fighter's mentality. These three things are purely based off of hard work that he puts in. You aren't born with a high lacrosse IQ, you have to work for it. So any young players out there should use this as an example to work on the things you can control and be the best at them. Every time we take the field, be the hardest working player out there. That's what makes the best stand out from everyone else. If you want to keep improving at lacrosse, continue to watch film and film breakdowns like this. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe.